Welcome to What is Good, a podcast from the Texas Baptist Christian Life Commission, where we explore contemporary cultural issues through a biblical lens. Micah 6:8 says that God has told us what is good, that we're to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with Him. So whether you're seeking a better understanding of how to live that out, or you're just curious to understand a Christian perspective of what's happening in our culture, we hope that you'll find today's conversation helpful as we discuss what is good. Well, hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of What is Good. It's the podcast where we don't talk about what's so-so, we don't talk about what's meh, we talk about the things that are good in life. It comes from our theme verse, Micah 6:8. I am going to be hosting today's episode. I am John Litzler, the Director of Public Policy for Texas Baptist, and we're joined by some familiar voices that you'll know. Our Director for this ELC, Dr. Katie Frugier. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. Glad to be back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And also our Director of Ethics and Justice, Dr. David Sanchez. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I was tempted to speak in an accent. Since you said familiar voices, I was going to try and sound unfamiliar.
Make it an unfamiliar voice? Oh,
Why,
you just
hello.
want to thwart me.
I didn't know what accent to do. And that wasn't trying to be a specific accent. I don't want to offend anybody.
It's a lot of pressure to come up with an accent right away.
It is. And we have a special guest with us today. It is Dave Lyons, who is our Texas Baptist Director of Support Services and Information Technology, also abbreviated as IT. Dave, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We are so glad that you are here, and it's a good time to let people know that the CLC is going to be focusing on different contemporary topics and issues throughout the year. We're going to shift focus. Our target right now is to do it quarterly, and I'll just tell you, since you're listening to this podcast, this first quarter, we're really focused on technology. It's something that is interacting with our churches all the time. It's always changing and growing, especially in the year 2026. And so we want to give as many practical, tangible, helpful resources as we can to churches and church leaders on the issue of technology in the church. And we're hoping this podcast will be one of those resources. And we immediately thought nobody better to talk to than our own in-house expert, our Director for IT, Dave. And Dave, before we get into kind of our content for the day and our topics a little bit, I'd love for our listeners just to know a little bit more about you. So would you just share a little bit about how long you've been at Texas Baptist and maybe even just kind of how you got into the IT field in the first place?
Sure, I'd love to. I've been here almost 22 years, so obviously seen a lot of changes over the years. Grew up in Marshall in East Texas, so that's probably detectable in my accent.
I'm a Sulphur Springs guy, so 903 area codes to the
I
end,
wouldn't
Dave.
have guessed. All right. So graduated high school in the late 70s, and back then there were no computers in Marshall High School. There were some in the city of Marshall, but there were no personal computers, nothing like that. And I was editor of my school paper, the Marshall Maverick, not very creatively named, but I loved writing.
I love that.
And when I was a graduating senior, the editor of the Marshall News Messenger, the sports editor, was out on medical leave, and they didn't have anybody to write up the red and white game, the spring game. So my pinnacle of journalistic achievement was writing the recap, who won the game, red or white and all that, writing that and having a byline in the Marshall News Messenger.
All right.
And the reason I say that is it was a hard decision for me to decide between journalism and computer science because computer sounded cool. So then I chose computer science, went to A&M, first programming class, first semester, Fortran. I fell in love. I just love programming. And then I had a different programming language the next, and just everything in computer science love. So that's how I got into it. And I want to credit God with that because I was not very intentional about it. It could have gone either way. And if you know about print journalism and IT, those are very different career paths, and I chose the one that helped me provide better for my family. And my career's kind of been like that too. I've never been intentional about where do I want to go? Do I want to go to management? Do I want to go to architecture? Where do I want to go? But God has just stepstoned I've worked 3 or 4 places before I got here. I was at Guidestone for 8 years before I got here. But every time I look back and can see God's fingerprints on it, that I needed this skill to go do the next thing. So that's how I got into it. I love it. I'm very thankful for my ministry assignment here, and happy to be a part of this today.
Outstanding. Well, we are grateful for you, Dave, and all that you do for Texas Baptist. Thanks for being generous with your time with our team this morning. I want to start, I don't know why I wanted to start with this. It's just the area of tech savviness that always catches my interest. If there's a headline in it in the news, I read it. It's the part that seems most relevant to me, and that is cybersecurity and fraud. I am fascinated by these issues. And anytime a phishing email or something like that goes out, I always get fascinated by these folks who kind of get ransomware or that kind of thing. I've got a funny story about it. I didn't ask my dad permission to share this story, but he is an attorney in my hometown, and he practiced law there my whole life, 30 plus years, 35 plus years practicing law there as his own boss, his own firm. But he recently transitioned to working for a bank in town. He's their in-house counsel now, their general counsel. And they sent out a fake phishing email to, kind of help bank employees know, because they've got sensitive financial information. You don't click these things. And 2 people in the bank clicked that email.
Oh, no.
It was a 21-year-old woman, 20-year-old young lady who was a teller, and my dad. And so my dad called it detention because on a Saturday, he and this one young lady, the only 2 people in the company that clicked it, had to come in and do this training on how to learn and avoid phishing emails and scams and all that. And my dad said he was so humiliated. He was like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. And I'm overly cautious. I don't know if Dave thinks I'm overly cautious, but I'll get legitimate emails and send something to them and be like, is this real before I click on this? And sometimes it is. But we do that occasionally. We'll send out, company-wide, do some protective measures like that. I want to ask Dave about that in a bit. But I thought before that, I'd ask you, Katie and David, do you guys have any interesting cybersecurity stories to share, or any funny, not necessarily phishing, but anything like that that's happened, someone trying to hack an account or get someone's information?
Over Christmas, this isn't funny. Well, it's a little bit funny, I guess. But I'm like you, John. Like, I'm very cautious about it, and I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at catching them. But every now and then, these, especially the scam ones, they're getting so advanced and so believable. Over this just last Christmas break, I think we were actually maybe even in a CLC meeting. I got a receipt from what appeared to be GoDaddy for $500. And the problem with that is my husband is very entrepreneurial, and it is completely within the realm of possibility that he had forgotten that there was a subscription to some websites, because he typically owns a couple of different domains that he just holds on to just if he wants to go do a business, adventure. And so I'm sitting there, Christmas, $500 is a lot around the Christmas season to suddenly accidentally get charged that we hadn't budgeted for. And so I immediately kind of have to pivot my brain, and I'm texting him and I'm like, did you do this? Did you need to cancel this? I've been on you about doing this. And it turned out it was completely fake, even though it looked like a legitimate receipt. I pulled it up on my phone even before this podcast recording. I can send a picture to you guys about it. It looks like a legitimate receipt, GoDaddy, all of the different things. Even the email was appearing to come from GoDaddy.com, but it was completely fake and caused possibly marital tension for no reason.
Possibly.
That's a great point, Katie, about how much better they. We've come along days from the Nigerian prince.
Right.
That because I got one from Instagram that was I think millions of people did, that was claimed to be a password reset, and it was not from Instagram. David, how about you? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember very early on in phishing emails, I think before I even knew about them, I definitely succumbed to getting an email that I thought was from my bank, but it wasn't, going to a website and putting in a bunch of personal information. But as soon as I did it, I just got this sinking feeling, and I went back and just started looking over all the links and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't think this is my bank. And I immediately called my bank, immediately called my credit card, immediately did all of these things. I basically tried to Jason Bourne disappear and reinvent myself. But even then, I think it was 2 weeks later, Dell called and was like, hey, we just wanted to double check. Did you buy a $2,000 laptop? And I was like, no, I did not. So I went back to my bank and also purchased the identity theft, the insurance protection thing, and had that for about 20 years before I felt like, okay, I don't think they're trying to steal it anymore.
Oh, that's so scary.
So, in any given church, you've got people whose tech savviness, who are on staff, whose tech savviness is all across the board. There are some who may be very tech savvy and some who are not. I like to think of myself as being tech savvy, but I couldn't get my microphone to work before we started recording, so maybe I overestimate my abilities a little bit. But Dave, something like this, like phishing email scams, it seems like such a basic thing, but it's such a big threat to churches. What are some other types of maybe cybersecurity threats or concerns that churches or parachurch organizations are facing that you know of that are out there?
Well, I think phishing is probably number one. Behind that is malware and ransomware, and they can come in through phishing. I mean, phishing is when somebody wants your information so they can get money from you at some point. But there's attacks that are designed to lock up your data on your system and require you to pay. Ransomware is a big one, malware, which is just make bad things happen on your system. So those are two other ways, and there's just different variants of phishing. We're still seeing a lot of those just mass blankets, similar to the Nigerian prince, like I'm this person and I'm dying and I need someplace good to give my money. Would you help me spend the money? That kind of thing. And then there's ones that are really strictly targeted, like on customers of a particular bank or by name. I think all of us at work have gotten a fake email from our executive director saying, I need your help urgently. I can't talk. I'm in a meeting. Email me back.
Oh, that one plays on my pride, Dave, because I'm like, the executive director needs to talk to me and only me. Only I can help solve this problem.
Only I can go buy these Apple gift cards.
Finally, they acknowledge my potential.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Dave. We talked about the, testing it or practicing it, the fake phishing email. I know we've got churches that are all across the spectrum as far as what resources they have to be able to do this type of, protection or training or whatever. Can you suggest any kind of like basic steps or things that churches can do? If you're a pastor listening to this podcast and you're going, goodness, I don't know if my staff know how to avoid malware or spyware or something like that, what are just kind of some basic first steps they can take towards protecting themselves?
I think that's a great question. I think training is one of the first things you want to do is educate people, be cautious. And it's against our nature as Jesus followers to be skeptical. We want to accept it, but we want to think somebody genuinely wants our help or wants information or something like that. So you should be so careful, train them to be careful. Don't click on links. Don't click on attachments. Don't click on a text that, somebody sends you that you don't expect or you don't know them. So just training for people to be careful is hugely important. Always keeping your computer updated. We recommend, especially for smaller churches, a Chromebook because they're just kind of impenetrable to viruses. You just reset them and it's all gone. It's a Chromium-based operating system. They're pretty inexpensive. They can do anything on the web that any other computer can do. Apple Macs are generally safer than Windows machines, but Macs and Windows are both susceptible to zero-day attacks. As soon as somebody finds a flaw, people start attacking. And the way to address that as fast as you can is keep your updates. Don't delay updates. Whenever you have an update on your computer, keep it updated.
That's really good, Dave, because I think I'll just speak from like my phone. When my phone starts to get old and it suggests an update, I don't want to do it because I'm like, this is going to slow my phone down so much.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And maybe I don't have a lot of storage space left on my phone. I'm like, I'll have to delete something to install this update. So I think the mentality for a lot of our churches and church folks can be, this will slow down my machine, or am I going to have to delete to free up space? They are not thinking, this could have a cutting edge response to the latest thing a hacker figured out or something like that.
Or it could be just, it's working for me. Why am I going to update something if I don't feel like I need it to be updated?
Exactly. What frustrates my creative and musical and artistic wife the most is it's going to move things around and things are going to look different. She's like you just said, it's working for me. Why do I have to change? And the number one reason that I care about is security. It protects us from attacks.
Such a great point.
Similarly, having a software to protect yourself like antivirus on your computers is very important. There's a lot of those out there that are tried and true and really good. Where you can, in different accounts, use multi-factor authentication. And that's just a big thing that says, I want some other way to prove who I am. Because if somebody steals your password off your computer or something like that, if you do something like one form of multi-factor authentication is send me a text or a push notification on my cell phone, and I'll verify that it's me. Anywhere you can, I encourage that. Bank software, anything else, just because when you have that, if something is compromised, everything won't be compromised. So you do not want to use your computer in admin mode. I have an admin account. I don't use it because it's not part of my responsibilities. And, the folks in help desk have network admin accounts. They don't use them every day. They only do it when they're doing that work, because when you sign on, whether it's a Mac or Windows, as an administrator, that's the keys to the kingdom. If somebody somehow gets control of your session, they can do anything you can do and just cause all kinds of damage. I think being really careful about your applications. Don't have anything you don't need, and stress to your staff, if it's not for our ministry purposes, it doesn't belong on our computer. And I know that can seem restrictive, but don't browse for personal, because you can get things, you can download things that are not going to be good for your computer. And wherever possible, back up your data. We try to stress to our staff, don't have files that really only live on your computer. You could drop it, it could be destroyed, or something else. You want to back it up if you're a Google person, to Google Drive, or if you're a Microsoft person, to OneDrive, or there's other third-party apps out there where you can safely store your data online. You don't want to be caught losing a bunch of work, losing a bunch of sermon notes, or whatever other kind of preparation you have. So I think those are some basics. But like you said, John, we go from, so many of our churches have one person with a computer, and there's a limited things what they can do. It gets really more complicated when they have a network, because one person can bring something in that brings the whole thing down. So there's a lot more tools there, and we have some resources we can guide people to. There's a government one called CISA, CISA.gov, and they have a faith-based community page to it it doesn't apply to everybody, and maybe it's a little more geared towards churches with more resources, but there's helpful information there for everybody.
That's great. And we may put a link to that CISA.gov website in our show notes as well.
That'd be great.
So that people can just click it. Dave, these are great tips. I want to circle back around to the antivirus stuff real quickly. No, we don't have a sponsorship with anyone, unfortunately. No one's paying us to plug their stuff on this podcast.
But we're open to it.
But we're open to it. My question on that is, are there any good, say you're a church that doesn't have a lot of budget for something like that, are there any good programs that are free that you can use, or do you really need to go ahead and pay for a premium antivirus type software or something on computers?
That's a great question. The more you're on the web, the cloud, the more you need that protection. Microsoft has some built-in security called Microsoft Defender, which is very good. Apple has some built-in security that's very good. We have one that we put on top of it. So I think in general, you can find something that's affordable. We used one for a few years that was made in Russia, and we had a different relationship with them as a country then, and now we don't do business with that company anymore. So, check them out, vet them. If you're not tech savvy on your church staff, I bet somebody in your church is, and you can use them to help you find one that's affordable and respected.
So I've got one more question kind of on this line of thinking about cybersecurity in particular when it comes to technology. It seems to me, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but it seems to me that churches are particularly attractive targets. They're seen as being particularly vulnerable to these types of cybersecurity threats. I'm just curious, David and Katie and Dave, if y'all agree with that assessment, if you think that's true, and if so, if any of you maybe have any insight as to why. What is it about churches or church culture or something that just makes us so vulnerable to these types of things?
Well,
I'll go first. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say you would, I think, already alluded to this, that, church people are generally kind, trusting, that it's in our nature in some ways. Speak more to that, Dave, because I feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head.
I was just going to say, I was reading a statistic recently that 43% of cyber attacks are against nonprofits.
Wow.
And 43% of organizations are not nonprofits. So it's out of whack. And you guys work way more closely with churches than I do. But I think for the people I've talked to, they want to be trusting. They want to think the world is good. Maybe they forget that it's a fallen world and it's really, really nasty out there. I bet y'all know some other reasons why people may do that. But yes, churches are a great target. You've probably heard of hospitals who've been hit, and some of them have paid millions of dollars in ransomware because they couldn't function. without it. A lot of our churches don't have that kind of resources, but some of them have very significant money. So, yeah, unfortunately, that we're a big target, and there is no love or respect for religion or faith or anything like that from the bad actors out there.
Yeah, I'd imagine also just with nonprofits in general, you're more likely to have volunteers. And with volunteers, you're not as likely to ask as much of them, and that would include, strict training and rules for these things.
Yeah, that's good. So I wanted to start with cybersecurity because, like I say, that fascinates me. But let's zoom out a little bit and look just kind of bigger picture at technology use in church in general. I'll just share anecdotally. I saw, and I'm sure all of you did too, the way COVID just completely reshaped the way churches operate, particularly how they operate in regard to technology. We went from maybe some larger churches streaming their service to almost now 100% of our congregations, regardless of size or location, doing some type of streaming on, some type of platform of their services. Churches recording their services and putting them on a podcast, or pastors or staff having a podcast. I've seen churches, they're now allowing people to join their business meetings through Zoom or some type of teleconferencing. They're certainly having, maybe not a business meeting, but certainly like committee meetings, like a finance committee or a search committee will meet through Zoom because it's just easier if people are out of town or can't all get together trying to find a date on a calendar for the committee to meet. And so companies have just made it easier for churches to be able to do more things technology-wise. And I'm just curious, Dave, what are some ways you see churches using these types of technologies I just described well and effectively, and maybe what are some ways that they're not using them so well?
Well, I think you listed a great list of ways that churches are using them, and I think in generally they're doing it very well. For example, my church, it used to be texting once in a while, and now you sign up for what you want. There's the 5-digit code they give, text disciple to 45859, and then you get the discipleship emails and different things. If you want to find out about being a new believer, text alpha to this. I think that's very effective. A lot of people live on their smartphones now, and I think a lot of churches are doing that very well. One thing I've heard some of our staff talk about, and people at my church, is that COVID was just a crippling blow to in-person attendance. And that's rebounded a lot. I don't think it's rebounded all the way. A lot of people think it never will. But for people who are health challenged, being able to watch a service online is wonderful. And we were not Zooming in our Sunday school class anymore, to use the old term. But we did that for a long time too. So I think those things were really effective uses of technology. And now I hear some churches using AI to improve some of their processes, and we'll talk. I'm sure that's a bigger topic for a bigger day, but there are some ways that churches can use that effectively and make some of their processes more efficient.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because it is kind of the elephant in the room, right? AI and how it's affecting churches. And I don't want to avoid the topic. If we need to talk a little bit about AI, we can, but I also want to emphasize we're going to have a whole separate podcast episode just dedicated to AI. And all of the stuff in there, because it is such a large topic that we feel we need to give a whole podcast episode to it. But I'm glad that you brought it up, because it may sound weird. Why aren't they talking about AI? That's such a big technology issue for churches there. So, I thought of something else too while you were talking just then about COVID keeping people from coming in. One thing I didn't mention was the online giving, and a push more towards online giving and even less of like passing the plate and stuff in church. But one of the things about online giving, and it's going to kind of segue into my next question here for Katie and David, is there's this balance between, yeah, that's great and it's convenient. And boy, if you had an ice day or a snow day, or if people are traveling on vacation, how great that you're not dependent on them being there physically in person to give. They've already got it set up electronically. But there's a theological component to that as well of, well, hang on a second. What's the heart of giving, and what's our posture supposed to be with tithes and offerings? And is there something that changes when you get credit card points for, your online giving to the church and that kind of stuff? And I'm not saying we necessarily have to get on into all those weeds, but my broader question is, churches shouldn't operate like a secular business. A pastor shouldn't be thinking about technology the same way a CEO of a Fortune 500 company might be thinking about technology. We're not all about maximizing profit and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious if you're all having any thoughts on maybe some ways that church leaders should be thinking about technology? Again, kind of a higher philosophical level here. Thinking about technology differently from maybe the way the for-profit world or the secular world would think about using technology.
I think that's such a good question, John. One thing that I wish I saw pastors and church leaders do more often is not only use the technology that's available, but also be discipling their congregations with how to use that technology responsibly. And I'm just thinking all the way back to the very basics of that book, having a Mary heart in a Martha world. Phones have made us so busy. Phones have made it so that there's not a single moment in the day where we can't either be productive or be entertained. We're, in general, spending less time in person, less time in nature, less time communing with God. And so I think there needs to be striking a balance of becoming all things to all people. So I'm going to do whatever I can to reach people, but then also modeling how a Christian community is never letting something else become their master over God, whether it's the dopamine that we get from our algorithm feeds or the workaholism that's fed by how convenient it is to be answering emails in our beds at night. So I'm about to rant, and it feels like it needs to be a whole other topic. So I think it's just discipleship needs to happen in the area of technology.
That is so well said, David, because even just thinking through the past couple of years, you just don't really see churches talking about discipleship as it relates to technology, that it kind of seems to be secondary issues. Like discipleship is, we're having a Bible study and we're doing this over there, but really it's so much more encompassing, right? That it's, we know technology is formative. It's forming us, it's shaping us. And so that is discipleship as well. And so it's an obvious place that we need to have more discipleship, more intentional conversations. John, I also think pastors could think about technology from the perspective of just being good stewards of the resources that God has given us and the time that we have. Technology definitely is able to make things more efficient, go quicker, so that we can maybe have a bigger kingdom impact on certain things. I'm thankful for some of the ways that technology has helped make everyday tasks a little bit easier. I'm really, really thankful that I don't have to wash dishes by hand anymore because technology allows me to have a dishwasher. So I can have more time with my kids to be able to spend with them or talking with my daughter about how her day at school went. And so technology, I think, has the impact to be able to make us more effective and efficient in the ministry assignments that we have. And so utilizing it as a resource, being good stewards of it, I think is Christ honoring in that. And it's a way to approach it from a different perspective.
Yeah, Katie, I think one of the things you mentioned was just something as simple as you're having a church meeting and you record it and then have AI do a transcript of that meeting, and that saves someone else the time of having to do the transcript.
Yeah, it's audio to be able to create minutes. No one volunteers joyfully to say, I'll record this and do the minutes for this business meeting. I love recording minutes. Yes, and so technology easily now can just sit there, record it, have a human proofread it, but it basically turns what used to be a whole afternoon's work into maybe an hour-long project.
Okay, I love that this discussion of technology naturally just kind of lended y'all going to the people who it can help and save time, the volunteers that would have to transcribe meeting notes and all that, because you're already thinking about the people. And I want to talk about that, the people behind the technology that we implement at our churches. Tech volunteers and tech teams, these are people who serve in churches usually every Sunday with, you need them every single Sunday, but not always in a visible or public way. They may not sing with the choir, the praise team up in front of everybody.
Yeah.
They may not lead a Bible study class where they're speaking in front of everybody. They're usually in a tech booth or at the back somewhere. They're setting up the microphones and sound equipment before the service. You may not see them as much during the service. It's an unrecognized job. It's relatively thankless. I say unrecognized as long as things go smoothly. The one time you notice your tech team is usually when something messes up.
The slide deck's not progressing.
They're like the offensive line, right? You just, until they make a mistake,
that's right.
You don't notice.
Nobody cares about the offensive line until they give up a sack, and then it's like, hang on a second. So, so Dave, what are maybe some mistakes that you see churches making with their tech team or their volunteer people who help with IT type things? or maybe that's mistakes isn't the best way to put it. To put it more positively, what are some things you think churches can do to better support or encourage these volunteers, maybe to make them feel appreciated, to help them avoid some burnout?
Yeah, and I think that burnout is a big thing among volunteers in technology and in other areas as well. It's going to vary based on what your resources are. Can you take them out to lunch? Or sometime when they're not busy, can you do something for them to bless them? I think that's really important, to be intentional about that. And I'm a volunteer in preschool at my church, and there was a technical problem, and I had to email the IT guy about it. And boy, have I been on the other end of emails with frustrations, and this was a frustrating problem, and it drug on and all that. But just realizing these are people, and they're giving, they're donating their time, they're serving in this way. Be gracious to them, be merciful to them. It doesn't mean pretend like there's no problem. We got to check in the kids. The labels have to print. Address that, yes, but be as kind as you can. Be patient. I think maybe once in a while recognition from the pulpit, of people that are behind the scenes that help make the services and the rest of the church happen is probably a good thing to do. I know there's more creative people than me, but making those people know they're appreciated and what they do is vital. Where I go to church, we have it, and this is totally separate from IT, but an AV team that does incredible work. And I try to tell them every time, my wife or I are not up to go into church in person, just say that was wonderful. We got to worship. We got to enjoy that message. So appreciating them, showing how you can do it. And if you can, get enough volunteers where you don't have that burnout, where you don't have to do it every Sunday, or if one Sunday you're out, you're scrambling. I know in general, it's hard to ask a minister, find a backup for somebody who doesn't show up. Somebody should be able to get their own backup. But maybe there's some times when you shoot for AV and video and IT people where you do have a backup in mind. You call on somebody else to come in and help out or fill a spot.
Yeah, that's a good word. Whatever your IT plan is for your church, not just on Sundays, but during the week, your IT thing or whatever. It shouldn't all come down like a house of cards if someone has a sick kid or, or needs to take a vacation day or a mental health day. They shouldn't feel the weight of that all being on them so that they can't have normal time off for life things that happens. And Dave, I'm going to take you to heart about appreciating people who do things in the world of tech. And I'm going to start right now by appreciating our own David, who does a lot of stuff for our CLC in the areas of tech. He edits this podcast for us every time. He updates our website. If I want to get something done on the CLC has its own webpage that is linked to the Texas Baptist webpage, but he can update our webpage for us immediately. We can go through our communications department, but we don't have to because David knows how to do that and just does all kinds of technical things for us. So David, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this topic too, about how to make volunteers at your church feel appreciated or avoid burnout, or just things that churches can be doing to help these people realize what a valuable part they are of the kingdom work that the church is doing.
Well, you say kingdom work. I'm going to kind of go back to my answer from before of make sure that they're actually being discipled, that they're being cared for as whole people and not just people who serve a task. And if they did that task well, we congratulate them. I'm going to go back to a sermon that I heard Steve Bisner preach a couple years ago when he was still the pastor of Houston Northwest Church. He was preaching on the part of Acts where the deacons were picked out to serve because the leaders didn't have time to be handling the issues that were coming up. And he pointed out that when they were looking for qualifications for the deacons, that they wanted them to be people who were spirit-filled. And his application to that was every role of service within the church, no matter how small or how menial the task is, needs to be and can be a spirit-filled task. And so people doing tech can do it in a way that is spirit-filled. So just the challenge to us to think more deeply about stuff that we often take for granted and treating people, like Dave said, as people, but even more so, making sure sometimes people who are really good at tech are also staying up really late at night, not getting enough sleep. Like, are you getting enough sleep? Like caring about the whole person and not just about what relates to that task.
Yeah.
And you guys do that for me well. So that wasn't a criticism or anything like that.
David, are you getting enough sleep? Are you taking care of your body?
I'm trying. I love it.
So we already talked about this a little bit when we talked about cybersecurity threats, and Dave gave us kind of a great list of some things that churches could do, some protective measures they could take. It was very helpful. I just want to acknowledge for a second, if you're a pastor, or maybe you're a bivocational pastor, or an interim pastor, or a volunteer church leader, or helping lead a church that's in between pastors, I know you guys do a lot. You have so much on your plate. It's not just the sermon prep, but leading the staff and volunteers and the hospital visits and checking in on the people who are hurting in your community and in your congregation that need help. And so a lot of times I think technology can just get pushed to the back burner, honestly, either because the pastor doesn't feel that tech savvy and they don't feel confident in leading in that area, or just because there are so many other aspects to being a pastor and a church leader that are going on. And so I just wonder, Dave, even outside of cybersecurity, when you mentioned multi-factor authentication, I thought, what an easy thing you can set up and enable in there. Are there any things like that? Maybe a church doesn't have a dedicated IT person on their staff. Maybe they have to contract outside help, or maybe they don't have a budget for an IT person. What are just some easy wins, some easy things for the pastor who may be really busy and doesn't have, hours to sit down and come up with a comprehensive IT plan, or they don't have someone on staff? What are just some easy wins that you see out there for churches of something they could do?
Oh, that's a really challenging question. Not a lot comes to mind right off the bat, because I'm thinking of that pastor that, like you said, technology's in the background to him, and they don't have tons of time to spend on technology. There's some programs out there where you can email your folks, low cost or free programs, so you can have an email list, you can email staff, email your members, your congregation, your church family.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. And
sorry, I'm just kind of struggling.
That's okay.
That's a great question.
Well, and two, let me ask you this, Dave. I know our Texas Baptist staff, we're moving to this Google-only kind of platform, and that seems, I could be speaking completely out of ignorance, but there's a lot of really powerful, free or pretty cheap resources that are just really, especially with the kind of growing advancement of AI and all this, it seems like the packages, just the basic packages of some of these programs are really becoming pretty powerful that churches could utilize. Am I off on that, or does that seem, are you tracking with that as well? Are you sensing that the overall quality of some of these basic things like Gmail and G Suite are really powerful now that churches can utilize?
They absolutely are. And an individual account for Gmail is free, and you get a generous amount of storage for an individual for that. So that's a great point. Those tools are strong and low or no cost. One caveat is when you're looking at something free, if it's involving AI, sometimes if you're doing the free version, one of the things that you're clicking when you say I agree to all this is that they can have access to your data.
Yes.
You don't, in general, want to let people have
Right.
access to your data. It's like the paid version of this, it'll be private, and you decide whether they get it or not. But no, there's tons of low-cost free tools out there. You just want to vet them,
Yeah.
or have somebody technical in your church family to vet them and say, hey, is this a good thing to do? Google's a great one. There's also a free version of Microsoft for people that love that world. It's web-based, and it doesn't have all the features of the other. They're happy to take your money for that.
Sure.
And for their AI tool, Copilot, you'd pay for that. But no, those are very powerful, useful tools that can help you accomplish all the things you're doing better.
Yeah, I love it. I love using some of the free resources through Google and things like that. I don't have a license for Word anymore, but I can do everything I need through Google Doc, and being able to track that and share that easily with our team. We use that for all of our team meetings now, for our team minutes and everything. We just kind of have a living document that's just kind of always being updated. I'm the staff liaison for the resolutions committee for Texas Baptist, and we write all of our resolutions on a Google Doc now, because we used to all sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, and it was really hard to track changes. Like, oh, you changed that line over here or over here. And now we just kind of all pull it up, and just with one quick share button, we're all looking at the same thing. And it just it feels like utilizing this pretty easy resource made it so much easier to edit a document for our ministry assignment.
And you just brought up something that I wish I'd answered John with. First of all, it's the collaboration. It's free and easy to share a Google Doc with anybody. It makes it where you can collaborate with them. Committee meetings, people that you want their opinion on something, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Great
really
point,
good.
Katie.
I appreciate the wisdom and the discernment on the free things. Low cost or free is great. Just like you said, properly vet it. It's one thing when you download some free app or technology or something and give it access to a photo of your cat or your dog that you took. It's another thing when you download that at your church and you give it access to your membership roles and, get financial or giving data or any of that
addresses,
kind of stuff.
all of those things.
Addresses,
yeah.
all of that.
That brings something else to mind that I feel like I need to say is you want to avoid at all costs having any financial information on your computer or any computers. All these giving applications store it securely somewhere else. If you get compromised, you do not want your members giving information out there in anybody else's hands. So you want to make sure you use a reputable, solid, safe giving app. And one other thing about giving that you made me think of is pay this bill, pay that bill, pay the other bill. I do not want I do all my giving online. I do not want my gift to any of the ministries I support to be like paying a bill. I want to stop a moment and think about what I'm doing and make it the act of worship that it should be. So where it's easy to look at technology and say, okay, I'm super efficient. I paid that bill in 25 seconds. No, I need to stop and pause a minute and thank God for providing me the income. And then also, to pray for that ministry that God will use those dollars.
So this kind of gets to David's discipleship point a little bit. I'm going to kind of blend into what you're saying here, David, which is I hear churches mention all the time, you can give online. You don't have to. Some have a box at the back of the sanctuary or they pass an offering plate or whatever, but they're always encouraging you can give online. What I don't usually hear pastors say is, if you do give online, maybe take a second and stop and pray for, God's faithfulness to our church or how this is going to be used to advance the kingdom or anything. It just sounds like a convenience thing and not a faithfulness and heart thing. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And Dave, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and you've already gotten into a little bit, I think, was we're talking about churches that have all different varying amounts of funds or staff or ability to do these things, was how do we prioritize? And it sounded, just listening with my ears, it sounded like you were saying one thing you ought to prioritize is not having your giving stored on your computer. Like one easy thing to prioritize, if you're looking at all this stuff and you're going, I'm overwhelmed, where do I start? What do I do? One of the first steps or one of the things you ought to prioritize should be getting that moved offsite someplace more secure. And if you're looking at your budget and you're going, what do we prioritize funding? If there's fees associated with storing it somewhere offsite that's secure, that is money well spent, because you really don't want your giving data or your financial data of your congregants or the people who support your ministry to be getting out there. Anything else that you would recommend maybe that churches prioritize? If they're going, hey, we've got a little bit of money or a little bit of resources that we can invest in something, this is really something that we should do.
That's a great question. I would say for anybody that processes your gifts, if you're paying 3% or higher, you need to shop around for somebody else. There's so many different options out there and so many different rates. You want to be as close to 1.5% or so as you can be. Credit cards are more than electronic bank payments, but you want to be real careful how you do that, because most of the online giving things take 1% of the gift. So it's not like you have a different bill. You need to be aware you're paying that every month. So whatever percent it is, you have to remember that is a real expense, even though you're not feeling the pain of making a payment to them. But other things to possibly prioritize, church management software. There are so many out there. There are some that are great and some that have low or no cost versions. Once again, you want to vet it and everything. And I'm not an expert in church management software, but those tools can do so many things. A big church, like where I'm blessed to go, has check-in as part of it. The giving is part of it. Event management is part of it. You sign up for things, pay for things, all check in, yourself. There's so many things you can do. What really matters to you, you determine what you need to do in your church and see what church management software can do that for you now. It's affordable to you. So, and once again, you want help, you want references, you may want to talk to other pastors that you network with. What do you use for church management software? What do you use for your giving? I think that's a good way for churches to help one another. Back when COVID hit, we came up with a list of, 8 or 10 different giving platforms we could recommend. And it's so different now than it was from 2020. There's so many other good ones that people use. And uh, that are valid and legitimate and helpful.
Yeah, it seems that since 2020, in some ways it feels like it was just a blink of an eye ago. In other ways, I look at the landscape, especially the technological landscape, and my goodness, have things changed. In some ways, we just kind of got put into like light speed with, we went from not even knowing what Zoom was to where now I feel like Zoom is almost kind of the ancient artifact now. We're talking about online things. And so it is incredible to see the growth that these churches have, is just even the options and the resources available to them. And so that's encouraging to me, I would say, just looking at, if I'm a church with limited resources, or I don't have a huge budget for some of these things, the great news is you're in a much better position now than even just 5 years ago.
And that's another free tool, Zoom. The free license for Zoom, there's some limits on it, but oh my goodness, it's so much better than nothing. And then built into Google is Google Meet. You don't pay anything for that. So there are lots of tools out there that can help them.
So here's my funny little anecdote real quick, guys. It took me a solid 30 minutes. I was trying to remember what we used before Zoom, and I suddenly realized it was Skype. I couldn't remember Skype for a solid 30 minutes, just trying to figure out. I have friends who are missionaries in Europe, and I was like, I know we met, but I know it wasn't Zoom. What in the world was that thing? I'll have to look it up now and figure out if Skype actually still exists. I don't even know.
That's like, Katie, when I try to remember the messaging I used before AOL Online. I can't ever remember. This podcast can be a great little time capsule. If anyone comes across this 100 years from now, and you can still listen to podcasts, I don't even know if you'll be able to 100 years from now. You'll be interested to see how some of these things hold up and what's new and what's different in the world.
Yeah, if you pick up the What is Good microchip and insert it into your brain and download all of our data.
No, it's going to be a wireless neural link.
You're right,
David.
you're right.
You won't
That's
get
right.
What was I thinking?
Absolutely.
I'm so analog. What's wrong with me? I'm picturing this giant opening here for an 8-track tape to just cram into the top of your head.
Ow, that just makes me cringe.
I miss 8-track tapes.
So, Dave, I want to wrap up with this. Our leadership at Texas Baptist is always praising you, and rightfully so, that you help find efficiencies in our technology, ways to save us money, ways to be good stewards of the funds that Texas Baptist have. And you've given us several tips on that today, and I really appreciate you help pointing out free options or low-cost options or some cost-effective things. If a church does have some money, maybe if somebody wants to give them some funds to improve something in the area of IT, or there's a need that they see and they want to give them some money, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how to go about maybe making a major tech-related purchase, or just how to be cautious before maybe even entering into a long-term contract. And I know there's a little bit of irony in the general counsel for the convention asking you how to better enter into contracts, but I've seen this with you, Dave, because if a contract goes sideways and there's an issue with the provider, or you're trying to get out of it or whatever, it can be expensive to fight, and it can be difficult to get out of. And you and I have had to work together sometimes to try to part ways, maybe when a provider's not doing what they promised and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on how to be cautious. You got this money, you're happy to go spend it. There's this big shiny thing maybe online you're shopping for, and people are saying this is the best or top of the line or whatever. Just how to be a wise consumer in the tech world, because truthfully, a lot of us that are on staff or work at churches don't know the first thing about, the name brands or the companies out there or anything like that.
Well, I think for smaller churches, if you have a tech-savvy person in your church family, having them assist you with that, or if you have pastor friends or staff friends that are tech-savvy, having them assist you with that, run things past them. It's always a good idea to get 3 bids for everything, whether we go on a new computer or software program, some other kind of hardware or software tool or service, and you want to read or have somebody read those contracts. I want to say, shout out to you. When you helped us, it was a tough situation, and I don't know if anybody else ever helped an organization get out of something like that, but you were incredible and persistent, and it didn't cost us a ton, and we righted that wrong situation. So, having somebody like that you can go to is wonderful, but if you can avoid that up front, hopefully you have an attorney in your church, or know somebody who can look at that from that kind of standpoint, say, really, it automatically renews? We need to make sure we know that. There's all these different kind of clauses and things you have to look for. What's the early termination? That's something I always look for. Another one that is what state are the disputes resolved in. A lot of them, it's not Texas. So if you can't get them to change that, you have to be willing to know that, wow, if we do come to blows with this provider, we need to know that. Something I've learned to do and love to do, and you can't probably do it starting out with technology, putting your foot in technology, but develop a partner relationship with either vendors. The people that I work with, and I still have to check their prices every few years, but I trust that they have our interests at heart. And they do, because that means we're going to keep paying them over the years. But they want us to succeed. So if you can find that in a partner, that's hard to get if you're buying a computer. They don't care. They'll sell it to somebody else. But there's instances where that can help. So have other people look at it, look at more than one option, and just be careful.
That's so good. I never even thought about the relational development to that there are ministries out there that the longer you have rapport and relationships with, it kind of is a win-win at that point, because they've got a business that they're trying to sell, but they want you to be a happy customer as well. So just kind of goes back to almost that discipleship component too. Again, I know that's a theme that we keep bringing up, but I just think about, wow, that's a really Christ-like way to go about having products. I love that.
And there's a company that helps churches with resources, and they have some free resources. And I'm going to send that link to you, David, to put in the notes. Haven't worked with them enough to vet them, but they have really good material. I disagree with a little bit of their AI stance. They're a little less cautious than I would be. However, all their cybersecurity, all that stuff is just spot on. And I'll send that link. There's some great resources for small to large churches that they can have. So I'll send that to you, David.
Awesome.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I think this has been really helpful. I hope it's been really helpful in guiding our churches. So thanks again, Dave, for joining us today. We always talk about what is good, and I think talking about technology and how churches can use it well and be smart about it and protect themselves from cyber attacks is all good. But we also like to share at the end of each episode something good that's going on in our lives. It can be maybe a headline that you saw in the news, or something going on personally in your family or your church or your community. So, David, are you all right if I start with you? Will you start by telling us what is good?
Yeah, so we are just coming off the end of staff week, where we spent a whole lot of time together. One of the things that was good, John, is good to see you in person, since you're usually in Austin. In fact, you're in Austin right now, but you were with us in person. Most of the team was there most of the time. And there was a lot of good reporting of great things that Texas Baptists are doing. One of the things that was shared, and it was shared so quickly that I kind of wished I could have heard a 30-minute story about it, was a Texas Baptist church that on the same day, in the same tub, I think was the word they used, baptized a Jew and a Palestinian.
Yes. I'm hoping
yes.
we get like an article or a write-up or something about that from our communications team or something, because that story sounded very powerful.
Yeah, so that's all I can share about it, because that was all that I heard. But that's everything that I want to believe and read in the scripture, that the kingdom of God is, right? It's Jesus on the cross, not just reconciling us to God, but also turning enemies into friends, tearing down that wall of division between us, as Ephesians 2 says, and making the two into one new person. And what more glorious way in this time with what's going on in our world to illustrate the peace of Christ and what it really brings to us than a Jew and Palestinian being baptized on the same day at the same church in the same baptistry.
Very cool. And it was good to see you too. Thanks for saying it was good to see me. It was good to see you too. I like when I get to be up in the building and see everybody in person. Katie, what is good?
Oh man, that was such a great answer, but mine feels kind of shallow now. I feel like our team does this, where we have some of us who have like really deep, profound what is goods, and other ones that are a little bit more on the surface level. No, my what is good, I'm just going to brag on my family a little bit. You guys know I have 3 daughters, and my oldest just submitted yesterday her class schedule for high school, and it is wild to believe that we're just right there on the cusp of having a high schooler, but I have loved having a teenager. I didn't really know what to expect.
Said no one ever.
No, but for real. It has been a complete joy. I've really enjoyed the season of motherhood, having a older child, getting to know her sense of humor, the things that she prefers, and all of that. And she woke up this morning extra early just to hang out and just to be present with the family. And so I'm just celebrating my what is good as, I guess, having kids grow up. It's bittersweet. I miss the snuggles, but it is also a joy to see who God is calling them and growing them to be.
I love that. I think that's wonderful. Dave, what's good?
Remembering. David started by talking about Staff Week. Staff Week, there's these wonderful stories. It just reminded me of so many different kingdom things that are happening at Texas Baptist. It just gets you fired up. You see the kingdom work going on, and it encourages you and it blesses you. Remembering that, I think we need that component of Staff Week. And thankfully, we didn't have dry presentations. It was stories. Tell us the stories, and I just love that. Making me remember about my career, where I could thank God again for that, because I have not been intentional about that, and He's had His hand on me all the way, and I'm thankful for that. Reminded me that when I give online, it's not just a transaction. I need to stop and put my heart into it, and thank God for providing for me and providing me a church home, and pray for the ministries it's going to be used for. And that's something my wife and I did too. At the end of the year, it was a rough year in many ways and a really year full of blessings in other ways. But to take a time and stop and remember those things, and even the tough things, you see God with you through all those. So I think remembering is a good thing.
I do too. I wish
John.
I wish I'd ended with you, Dave. I wish we had done you last.
David can do some magic editing or something.
I'm just going to put in the background, I will remember you while he's talking.
I hope it's that version of it. I hope it's you.
Right there. Yeah, that version.
I'll find the ukulele chords for
Get
it.
the uke going. Yep.
John, what is good? We need to hear yours.
Okay, so I saw on social media, it was a TikTok or a reel or something. Are y'all familiar with the restaurant First Watch? It's kind of like a breakfast and brunch place.
Yeah.
I'm going there right after this with my wife.
Are you going there right after this? Okay, well, this will help you feel good
John
about
always
it, Dave.
finding a sponsor for us. First it's HEB, now it's
If First Watch wants to sponsor our podcast, they're welcome to. We didn't name a specific antivirus company, so come on, First Watch. You can get in on this. But, Dave, you can feel good about this while you eat there. I saw it was a First Watch that was in Florida, and it was right around Christmas time, and they were going to have a company Christmas party or holiday party or whatever, and their manager canceled it. And the reason that he canceled it was he took the money they were going to spend on that, and they gave it to one of the employees who was trying to adopt a child, and they needed the funds for adoption. And, we're just... Texas Baptist is an organization that loves kids and loves babies and wants babies to be born, and we want to support foster parents and adoptive parents and all that. And I just thought it was cool that this, secular business was seeing the value in adoption and saying, what's more important than us having a party for our staff is to support one of our staff who's in need and trying to raise funds for adoption. I just thought that was a beautiful thing.
Wow.
That's great.
All right, so that's it. That wraps up our episode. Thanks for sticking with us today, and I hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot, maybe took away a practical step or thing or two that your church can do to either think differently or behave differently when it comes to involving technology in your ministry and what you do. We'll see you next time for another episode of What is Good.
Yay. What is good? Your microphones worked the whole time.
Yay!
All it took was this relatively inexpensive black wire.